from the grave to the sky. Lord, I lift your name on high. Lord, I lift your name on high. Lord, I love to sing your praises. I'm so glad you're in my life. I'm so glad you came to save us. You came from heaven to earth to show the way. From the earth to the cross, my debt to pay. From the cross to the grave, from the grave to the sky. Lord, I lift your name on high.
Hi, my name is Brian Zehr. Some of you may know me as Mr. Zehr because I work in a school. I teach social studies, and this is our first Fireside. And I'm actually sitting next to a fire, so if you see smoke coming into my face and me coughing, that's why. Today I want to talk a little bit about a few things. I want to talk about Jesus, and I want to talk about love. And that's what this whole thing is about, Jesus and love. So the first question I have is, who was Jesus? Well, Jesus was a man that lived at a unique period of time in human history. We have an empire known as the Roman Empire, and the Roman Empire is the largest empire on the planet. It has control over the entire Mediterranean Sea, which if you know anything about geography and trade and economics, this is really important. Basically what this meant is that Rome had control of all of the ports, all of the trading, buying and selling of goods from country to country, and that made Rome very powerful and very wealthy, which are good things for an empire. And Jesus was actually born in an area that was a territory of the Roman Empire. Rome had control over the area that Jesus was born in. And Jesus, at the time, posed a threat. And he didn't just pose a threat to the Roman Empire, but he posed a threat to the Jewish religion as a whole as well. So Jesus wasn't necessarily the guy that everybody liked. A lot of people loved Jesus because he was charismatic, he was a great teacher, he was a great leader. The issue came when Jesus claimed that he was the Son of God. Now this angered the Jewish leaders, and the reason it angered the Jewish leaders is because the Jewish leaders thought that it was blasphemous or wrong to say that you were essentially part of God. They didn't believe that Jesus was the Son of God, and they thought that it was wrong for him to be claiming this. So that is why the Jewish leaders did not like Jesus. Now the Roman leaders did not like Jesus because he developed quite the following. Many people, thousands and thousands of people, went to Jesus to learn his teachings. They went to Jesus to be healed. They went to Jesus to learn all sorts of things. And any kind of power during this period of time is a threat to the power that Rome has. So you have the Jewish leaders that didn't like what Jesus was teaching because it flew in the face of what they were trying to teach and practice. And then you had the Roman leaders who didn't like the power that Jesus was getting with his teachings. And so Jesus was seen as somewhat of an enemy to certain people. Now I want to answer the question, what is love? And I'm going to read a verse that talks about what is love. And you guys have maybe heard this verse before. It's spoken a lot at weddings. So bear with me here as I read this verse. It's 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 7. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, it always trusts, it always hopes, and always perseveres. One of Jesus' most important teachings is to love your neighbor. Jesus said this multiple times. Love your neighbor. In fact, this was one of the most important things that Jesus ever taught, was to love your neighbor. Well, what does that mean? So back in these times, you have groups of people living together, and they are surviving together. They're living together in these groups of people where that's where their identity comes from. They were expected to think the same way as their group of people that they lived with, live in the same way as their group of people that they lived with. And this was all for the survival of their families, their groups of people, their cities, their towns, their villages that they lived in. You were expected to behave in a certain way, believe a certain way, and this was all for the survival of this group of people. Well, Jesus comes along and he starts to challenge that and says, live in the way that I am teaching you. Jesus says that you need to love your neighbor. And he doesn't mean that you need to just love the people that you're living with. He doesn't mean just love your family. He doesn't mean just love the people that are living in the closest proximity to you. Jesus is talking about loving everyone that you are surrounded with. Now, our world today is a lot different, right? We have things like the internet. Okay, you can turn on the television and see the news from across the world. So in a lot of ways, our world has shrunk a little bit. So we have a lot more neighbors now than people had back then, right? There are some people that didn't even know other parts of the world existed back then. But Jesus still says to love your neighbor. And that looks a little bit different. So over the next few weeks, you guys are going to be learning about Jesus and learning about what it means to love your neighbor. Okay, even when life is hard, we're still called to love like Jesus. And life is certainly difficult in these times that we're living in now. So over the next couple weeks, I want you to be on the lookout for all those things.